Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Phew. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember how I introduce these things anymore.
I just want a pen, just in case. Okay.
Between the two of us, we're never going to get this. All right, we can do this. Hi there, I'm Nora Dunn, otherwise known as the Professional Hobo, and welcome to my interview series where I interview ordinary people who have had extraordinary travel lifestyles, careers, and adventures. Now, before I introduce my guest today, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. If you don't already subscribe to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button below this video. And if you like this video at any stage of the game, please give me a thumbs up. The earlier you do it in the video, the better, because then that will give me exposure to more people who are interested in remote working, traveling, and adventures. Now, I'm really excited about my guest today. Janice Waugh has been a lifelong traveler who was first inspired by her mother relating stories about cycling from hostel to hostel in the eastern townships of Quebec when she was about 10. It was just a few years later that Janice left for a month-long cycling tour of England and Wales at the age of 15. And that was it. She never traveled with her family of origin again until her mother turned 80. She traveled with friends, husbands and kids. And then, after her husband died and the kids were pretty well out the door, she traveled solo. Her longest trip was 12 months. Her shortest, well, escapes within the city are possible too. Janice started her blog, Solo Traveler, in 2009. On Facebook, her editor Tracy moderates the Solo Travel Society that has over 260,000 members. They also publish and update monthly the only list of tours and trips for solo travelers with no or low single supplements. This is an amazing resource that they come out with. You can sign up to get her newsletter and monthly tours update at her blog. Janice is the go-to source for solo traveler, and she's recognized by many media outlets, including the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, and more. And we're going to talk about some of those, some of the places she's been exposed to as well. She's been interviewed by 2 New York Times writers already this month. So I'm really excited. Janice, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
Now, you and I first met in 2009. I'd been traveling for 2 years. I was back from Australia for a visit home, and we were part of a very small group that was like the first Twitter meetup in Toronto, and which eventually turned into the Toronto Travel Massive, which is a huge organization now of travel enthusiasts and people who are in the travel career. So I feel like we were part of a seedling pod that just blossomed into something amazing in Toronto. And I was really impressed with your story when we met, because you were really just getting started at 2009. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about how you got started and what the impetus was to start Solo Traveler.
Yes. Yes, it was, in a sense, it comes out of a sad story. Well, absolutely, it does come out of a sad story. My husband passed away in 2006, December 2006, so the very end of the year. And grieving is a really rocky road, and you go up and down and up and down. And I was doing this for about 2 years, and I would have, of course, longer stretches of feeling good. It was progressing, but it was a very dull February Saturday afternoon, and anyone who has gone through a loss, the weekends are the hardest, for whatever reason. And anyways, I'm sitting on the couch, and I actually articulated, I guess I'm traveling solo. And I picked up my computer and I searched for it, and just the term, whatever I searched, the first thing that came up was a really spammy site. Now, if I dug deeper, I would have found really good sites like yours, but I didn't. And so I decided right then and there to, I think I'm going to do this. I was taking my niece, who was in town, out to the art gallery in Toronto that day, and she'd just come back from a South American tour with girlfriends. And I said, "What do you think about this?" And she went, "Oh yeah." So anyways, the next day I started and actually launched the site a couple of months later, and yeah, it all just kind of rolled from there. And I have to say, it was my path out of grief. It was just really a healthy thing to do, to have something forward looking, The travel was good for me, but also the focus of the blog.
And was it the solo travel or the solo traveler website that came first?
Solo travel.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had traveled solo in my 20s. You know, I went I went to my first trip to Europe was solo, and I even went to Budapest, and this was '85, right? So before the wall fell and all the rest. So it was a pretty crazy trip to go in there. But yeah, so I traveled at various points in time solo, but never in such a concerted fashion as happened after my husband died.
I definitely want to delve into the business side of things shortly, but first I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about your travel experiences. And of course, now we're on the theme of solo travel. How does solo travel differ from some of your other travel experiences, for example, traveling with your husband and or your kids?
The best things about it is that you are responsible for everything. It's also one of the worst things about it for some people,
Yeah.
right? But the fact that when I travel solo, I'm responsible for everything. I have better understanding of the logistics of how to get from one place to another. I get a better geographic sense of a destination, all of these details. And then I have a better memory of the trip because I wasn't just a passive person, right, in the process. So, think of it like watching TV versus, actually doing what's on television. Yeah, it would be a very different experience. So I think that, solo is in many ways a richer experience. And it's also the experience that gives you this great sense of confidence and being capable.
It's funny you should mention that about the solidifying the experience by doing it yourself. I often think of this when I'm driving somewhere. If I'm in the passenger seat being driven somewhere, I could be driven to that place or along that route 10 times and still not really truly know where we're going. It's not until I actually drive it myself that I know the route. And I'd never translated that idea into solo travel, but it's so applicable. And I think part of the reason for that is for me personally, let's say I'm going for a walk in a new destination, my senses are heightened times 10 when I'm on my own because I need not only for safety but also for just the sheer absorption of the experience and the lack of distraction of having a partner with me. I'm in it.
The distraction is a very big point, right? Because you're kind of it's not just so the distraction is a big point in that you are not distracted by this person who is, off in another direction in terms of why you're walking somewhere or what you're doing. But it's also a big point in that for me, meeting people as I travel is a big deal. And if I'm not connected to this person, I am kind of open to the world. And it's amazing how many people step into that space that I've created just by being by myself.
It is it's so much easier to meet somebody as a solo or to meet locals abroad as a solo traveler. I think that's for two reasons. One, when you're on your own, you're more approachable. And I often think that way. I'm much more likely to approach someone who's obviously a solo traveler versus maybe a couple who's engrossed in conversation. But also too, for the traveler, as a solo traveler, it's up to you to make those connections. So there is a certain, degree of courage, I guess, required to get out there and to meet people. But that also gets much easier with time.
And I think that's a really important point. My husband was incredibly gregarious. He was the one that, he walked into the room when the party started. And and so I was coattailing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started going solo myself after he passed, I discovered that one, I could do it, but also I had incorporated a number of his traits
Ooh.
along the way that I could then employ at my disposal. I'm an introvert, but I developed these skills as an extrovert. And I think the thing that I learned that was really powerful is that one must not think about how they were. Sometimes we get stuck with this concept of ourselves as we were as teenagers or early 20s. Mm-hmm. And forget all the growth that we've done so that if you're 50 or 55 or whatever and going out traveling solo, you are not that same person. And it's really important to do it, to discover just all the resources that you have accumulated along the way.
And you've touched on something that I want to hit in just a minute, which is the difference of traveling over the age of 50 to traveling in your younger years. But I just want to I want to clarify or ask a little bit more about one of the things you said. You said you took on many of the habits that your husband had in terms of some of the more extroverted traits of meeting people. Can you give me an example of something that you will do that makes the solo travel experience easier?
It's as simple as, if I'm looking at something, just engaging the next person beside me and going, wow, right? Isn't that something, right? Yeah, it doesn't take a lot to engage people in conversation,
Mhm.
or to get up and, ask someone if I'm sitting at a table, and, very often cafe tables are very close, and asking, I think I'm going here next today, but I suspect that you've got a better idea for me. What do you think? And people are just like, oh, ooh, what? Or ask them what's on the menu that you recommend. I had one really bad experience where this guy in New Orleans had me eat something was I thought pretty gross. But
I've had this happen too. And you have to pretend that you like it, right?
but it is a great thing to do because you're engaging with the locals, and you're getting the kind of the inside scoop on a local diner or whatever, and it's really fun. But so there's that aspect that I got. But my husband was a photographer, and so as we traveled, he would see the world differently than I would see it. And I found that I also took a bit of that with me as well. So that was kind of nice. That I wasn't expecting, because I see, everyone has their own interests and sees the world their own way. But I had a bit of that with him as well.
Very nice. Now, when you're traveling in places where language is a barrier, how do you engage people? It's obviously be a little more difficult to engage locals. Do you have any tips and tricks?
The smile, of course, is the international right language, um, and I kind of watch what's going on. Usually, young people are fluent or somewhat fluent in English. So if there's a need, I go to younger people. I find that when I'm traveling in a country where English is not the language, that I spend more time with other travelers as opposed to locals,
Mhm.
because the other travelers speak English. So that's what tends to happen there. But I am not hesitant to make sounds and hand movements to get my point across. I remember one time I couldn't remember I was in France. I couldn't remember the word for lamb. We were buying lamb. It's like, bah. And everyone in the butcher, looks at me. Okay, we know what you want.
Now, as you touched upon earlier, most of your solo travel experience since your husband passed away has been above the age of 50, but you had your first trip at the age of 15. So you've traveled all your life. How might travel be different above the age of 50 versus in your younger years?
I think it's not a lot different. I think I think if it's different, it's by choice. Right? If you want to take a tour and just let someone else do the driving, so to speak, then it's different by choice. I backpack and I do things of that nature. I go to hostels and the like. So that's not terribly different, except that I'm a bit of a novelty. I'm not the only person there. So it's really important that seniors realize, or people over 50 realize, that they'll go to a hostel, as long as it's not a party hostel, right? They'll go to a hostel and they will not be the only ones there. There will be 2 or 3 other people at their age, so to speak, and then, then probably a whole bunch of 20s and early 30s. But the fact that there are only a few, and if you're open to conversation, there will be some that really want to talk to you, right?
Cool.
So and that's really fun. Some will just really ignore you, and I get that too. They've got their own thing going on, but some want to talk to you. And I remember one guy in particular. I was in this great hostel in Kauai, and we'd had a couple of conversations, and he said, you're the same age as my parents, but you're nothing like my parents. And I thought, that's fantastic because I've given him a different model of what it looks like to be 55, 57, whatever I was at the time.
How do you mentioned something about staying away from party hostels. Do you have any tips or tricks to make sure that the hostel that you're going to stay at that night is not a party hostel?
Well, it's really just a matter of reading the reviews on Hostel World. You get a sense of, if someone says, yeah, it was a great time last night, it's like, okay, it's probably not the one. I mean, if I'm in the UK, I always use YHA.
It's funny. I was in Sydney, and I think I was at a YHA hostel because they actually are around the world, and and it was great, but it was a little bit pricier than another place that I found a few days later that was down the street. So I decided to save a few dollars. I would move to this other hostel down the street, and I got there and realized, much to my total despair, that it was basically a rooming house, and it was dodgy as dodgy can be. Like I woke up in the middle. No, it was just there were very unpleasant things that happened, and I realized paying those couple of extra dollars for a reputable hostel in a good part of town was well worth it.
Yeah.
Now, do you stay in dorms or private rooms? Do you have a preference?
I've once been in a private room, but normally I stay in a dorm. I prefer a four-bed, ideally. I had one experience. I was in London for the World Travel Market one year, and I was in a 12-bed dorm, and it was Halloween night. And I thought, oh, this is not going to go well because it's a big party night in the
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah.
And but everyone was really respectful. They came in quietly. It was a YHA hostel. They came in quietly up until about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And I can remember going, okay, there's one more left.
You're counting them. Yeah, I've done that.
They're my children. It's pretty funny, but yeah, and it works great. And yes, I was at a hostel with a backpack, and then, but I also had decent business clothes, and off I would go to business during the day, and then back at the hostel, and it all works.
Now, this is a lot about your interactions with other travelers. How have your interactions with locals changed above 50 versus in your younger years?
Oh, I think that they're actually better. I think that, yeah, I think that people are really excited to engage and curious about, why I'm on the road and what I'm doing. And they want to know about Canada, and I want to know about, their destination, where they are. And yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And they just want to take care. Like the majority of people really just want to take care of you.
This is something that I was actually just the other day reading about and have experienced myself in a number of different ways. A lot of cultures around the world, Western culture seems to have lost sight of this, but so many other cultures around the world have a really deep, immense respect for their elders.
Mhm.
And in such a way, a friend of mine was talking about how he was traveling with his parents. Now his parents were in their 70s, but everyone, I mean, it completely transformed his own travel experience because he was with his parents, and people were falling all over themselves to engage and inviting them to dinner, and really very curious and wanting to get to know them better.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about business, and I'm going right in with the big guns. You spoke at the Smithsonian Institute. Tell me about that. How did that come to be? What did you talk about? How did you get the gig? How can I get the gig?
That was just luck. One evening sitting at home, get an email from Joe Yonan, who was the editor of Food and Travel at the Washington Post. He just published a book about cooking for one, and thought that, and of course he had access to the Smithsonian, and thought that it would be good for it to be done as a combination. And he sent an email and invited me. I was like, okay, I think I'll go. I was really blown away. I was totally blown away and petrified because I had not done at that point any public speaking. I mean, I do now.
You jumped right into the deep end, didn't you?
No, I know, pretty crazy. But I mean, I do. I mean, whenever I can, I love it now. I love it.
Yeah.
But it took me about 5 minutes, and I had this kind of prepared thing going on. It took me about 5 minutes, and I went, okay, no. And then I just started talking, and it went fine. It went fine. But yeah, it was a pretty big deal. Doesn't hurt when you're out of the gate.
Well, and a few years ago, you actually took Solo Traveler from a solo venture into a business venture that included some other people. What was the tipping point for scaling up with your business?
Um, it wasn't really a tipping point. It was more of a slide, right? We kind
Tipping
of slid,
slide.
yeah, we kind of slid into there. So I'm not a detailed person, and Tracy's my friend, and she wrote a couple of pieces in the first year, and then, slowly she would do more. And actually, I had a writing business before Solo Traveler. And so as I was getting really sick of that, I would do worse and worse work. And so she would take it and make it good. And then we'd give it to the client. It was terrible. I mean, really, but we had a thing going on. But she's a really detailed person. So over the years, her hours have just been increasing slowly,
Mhm.
right? And now she's, pretty well, she's full time. So, and then Simon, who's now my husband, right? He, kind of joined on doing a bit of things. He's always been in sales. So he started doing the sales and actually built the business side of the business. And so now he's full time. So yeah, it was a many year slide before we could really support, the little team we've got.
Sure. Well, and were there any challenges? I mean, when you're running a business yourself, you have total control over all the elements and aspects, for better and worse. Were there any challenges in starting to divvy out those tasks?
No, it was pretty easy. It was pretty straightforward, right? Tracy takes care of Facebook, and proofreads what I write, and then she writes a certain. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And Simon takes care of the sales, and I try to keep an eye on the umbrella as to where the business is going. And but we're all so close, right? That it just works. It's one of those situations where, when you work with a friend, it's kind of like, oh,
It could go either way.
but it goes really well. We're all very respectful and supportive of each other, and we can all hear criticism. Yeah.
Now, your headquarters are in Toronto, but of course, your business is remote.
Yeah.
You could work from anywhere. And I assume on the trips that you've done, you've been working while traveling. Do you have any tips, advice, or have you experienced any challenges in working remotely concurrent to traveling?
I try to do as little as possible because it it pulls from the trip. It pulls from the immediacy of enjoying what's right in front of me. I don't keep a diary. I know I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to keep extensive notes. I live the experience, and then I go, when I'm home and writing about it, I go back and research the details so that what I'm publishing is accurate, but it's also emotionally accurate because I've lived the experience as much as possible. So I try that. That's my goal. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I do have to work, right? But I really try to keep it to a minimum.
So I have a thing with emails. I adore a clean email box, but of course, when you're getting dozens of emails every day, it's definitely a challenge. Do you use technology like your smartphone to clear things out while you're on the road, or are you able to actually just turn it off for the amount of time that you're on the road if you're on a short trip?
Yeah, no, I do. I do monitor the email, and I do just slide. It's gone.
Yeah. I know. I do that a lot. Every once in a while, I'll go on a trip and I'll be, because I have very limited access to email. I just, before I delete before I even read it. And then I get home and I think, wow, I really didn't have that many emails that I actually had to do. Then why is it that when I'm at home, it takes me so long? to answer my emails.
That's right. Well, you get to a point, right? I'm sure you're the same way where there's a certain headline that you have no interest in, right?
Yeah. I've recently started ruthlessly unsubscribing I don't know if I'm sure you experience this as well. I find myself on all kinds of lists from PR companies and tourism boards and whatnot. And the emails are interesting because it keeps my finger on the pulse in some degree to the industry. But I mean, they add up. So I've been ruthlessly unsubscribing lately in an effort to streamline everything that needs to be done, because I'm finding these days, especially remote work is there's a lot of things to do. There's a lot of balls to juggle
Yeah,
and keep in the air.
definitely. But I think that what you're describing there is something that is happening everywhere. People are being more selective as to what they want to read, and they've got the time to unsubscribe. And I think there's an email cleanup going on all over the place.
There is. Well, despite the email cleanup, I have to say I do continue to subscribe to and read all of your emails that come out, because you've got emails that they're themed. So I noticed that maybe once a month I get the one for trips and experiences for solo travelers, and then I'll get another one that's got some tips, and you have some different themed emails. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what it's like to subscribe to your emails?
Sure. So the first Sunday of the month, we put out our newsletter where we curate our top 5, travel articles that we found online or that we think are really interesting, and we point people to those, and then we just have a few other things that we throw in there. But that's the key, right? It's a tip of the month kind of thing from someone else. It's not from us. It's from someone else. And then all these other links, but 4 or 5 of them that we think would be interesting. And then we send out the advisory of deals, which is what we call it. And that's where companies that have deals for solo travelers, these are usually tours or river cruises or things of this nature. Sometimes it might be a rafting trip, whatever. It's a variety of things. And it's an advertising vehicle. They can only advertise if they have no single supplement or a maximum of 20%. So
Right.
now when we started this, 100% was pretty normal, and 100% is out there all over the place. But if they want to reach our readers, it's a 20% max. So that's the second Monday of the month. Then the third Monday, we give you just everything that we published in the last month, just so that in case many people just use that as their way of following what we've been writing about. So it's a roundup on the third Sunday. And on the fourth, I write about whatever I'm thinking about.
Nice.
So sometimes it's, it could be something about how I learned to ride a bike and what it's like compared to learning to go solo travel, or, it's an integration of thoughts.
Brilliant. And I do enjoy every episode, every issue as it comes out. And I really think it's just a veritable resource for people who are solo travelers and who are interested in solo travel. I feel that you are the leading resource for aspiring solo travelers around there. So thank you for
Thanks.
that.
Yeah, we try to provide. How-to advice is what we're really known for, and we try to provide it for those that travel solo on a trip, on a tour organized, and who go independently. We try to get that balance.
Now, do you have any advice for an aspiring remote worker or a newly minted remote worker who aspires to take their job on the road?
Plan to travel slowly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very slowly. I think that it's so easy for people to be overambitious
Mhm.
in terms of how they travel, how quickly they move on, and the like. And having done that 12-month trip, I mean, you're the expert here. But a long trip, you cannot move at the same pace as you can for a month. It's not possible. So it's really important to really pace yourself. And by doing so, oh my goodness, it's so much more interesting, because the longer you're in one place, the deeper you get into the culture.
Absolutely.
So, but of course, know that technology is stable wherever you go.
Well, and I'm finding in my experience, the technology is getting more and more stable everywhere we're going, to the point where places. I mean, I I lived in Peru for a couple of years in the Sacred Valley, and I mean, I don't even know how I coped with the internet connection that I had, but I did manage to cope at that time. But now, the very place where I lived has high speed cable internet. So more and more places are becoming connected to a point where I don't think that it's quite a going issue as it once was. However, it's important to do little things like make sure that all your adapters, you've got the right adapters for all your chargers. Or you know, there because we're so reliant on technology, especially as remote workers, there's no margin for error. If your computer doesn't work, if your camera doesn't work, if your internet connection isn't good, you're SOL.
And then, of course, there's also, as you know, the financial side of things, and you want a VPN so that you can securely get into banking and doing things of that nature.
Oh,
So
and you know, the VPN, I swear by VPNs for any kind of internet activity on any Wi-Fi connection, even if it's a password connection, if it's a password that you got in a public place, like in a hotel or a cafe, anyone who's ever been to that cafe has that password.
that's right.
And that means ultimately they can hack into your computer while you're there.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It
so
is public Wi-Fi. It is
exactly.
still public Wi-Fi. Yeah.
So even password protected is not entirely secure. So I'm all for the VPN as well. Well, Janice, this has been really great fun, very informative. You've been an inspiration to me, and I know to many other people. Where can we find you?
So we're called Solo Traveler, but you can imagine the domain is difficult to get. But we are solotravelerworld.com. And you can sign up for the newsletter on the site. You can also find us on Facebook, where we're actually known as the Solo Travel Society. We are connected. This is who we are, but we decided to go with society there just to give the ownership a little bit more to everyone there as opposed to ourselves.
And despite the fact that we are in Canada, traveler is spelled with one L. Is that correct?
It's spelled with one L, but with the URLs, you can always get to us with two.
Ooh, good to know.
Yeah.
I had a real crisis of how to spell traveler, you know, on my website and in my branding. You know, I use one L, and a friend of mine from the UK said, you know, you might want to check the spelling on that. And I said, you know, I'm playing to my audience. Most of
That's
my
right.
audience is North American, whereas in the States. So
Yeah.
one L it is.
Yeah, over half our audience is American, so it makes sense.
Any parting words for us?
You know, I'm always hearing from people that are hesitant about traveling solo. And I guess, bottom line, if you've got some travel experience, international travel experience, going by yourself is not a big deal because you've got all that knowledge already there. It's just a matter of being comfortable in your own skin, right? And if you don't have international travel experience, stay within your own country or where the culture is very similar to yours and the language is similar so that you can get used to travel as well as being in your own skin at the same time in a place where it's a little more comfortable for you. Otherwise, go.
I have a friend of mine. I've known her for decades, and she came to visit me when I was living in the Caribbean. And she's a mother of two children. She's a school teacher, so she's herded children, large groups of children, internationally on all kinds of trips. I mean, she is a well-traveled person. With other people. And when she came to visit me, she was going on her own. And she admitted to me after she arrived that she was petrified of the experience, despite the fact that she's used to guiding other people. There was a different element to doing it on her own. However, as soon as she arrived, she said it was the most amazing experience that she'd had because she could do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. She was, and as well, also the feeling of accomplishment for little things like, you know, I made it to my gate, you know, like it doesn't have to be a big thing, but to know that you did it on your own is a real confidence booster. And she said, you know, from that moment on, she said that she wanted to commit to trying to continue to travel solo every once in a while because it was really that transformative.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really good for people because of that very thing. And you come back home, and yes, you come back a little bit more confident. Many people look at you differently, going, oh, look at you, especially if you're over 50, right? When you're
Yeah.
becoming irrelevant in some people's minds, right? And if you're working in a workplace with, lots of people, which I don't do, you don't do, but if you are, and you come back and all those 30 somethings are looking at you just a little bit differently.
And I also think too, once you hit your 50s, your sense of self, I'm in my 40s, and I will say that my sense of self has done nothing but increase over the years. The older I get, the more confident I become in who I am and what I am, the more willing I am to stand up for whatever it is that I feel I need to stand up for. And I can only imagine as time goes on, that continues to increase, which can in its own sense really improve the travel experience, especially when you're going solo.
I think so. And I think for those that are not feeling that growth that you're describing,
Mhm.
and there are people that are like that they do not feel that growth, if they go to and travel solo, they'll find it.
Ooh, very good. I've never heard a better call to action to travel solo than that. Thank you so much for joining me, Janice. I really appreciate your time and your company. Uh, this is it. Thank you very much for joining me as well, you guys. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up and please do subscribe to the channel. I'm Nora Dunn, otherwise known as the Professional Hobo.